I was 13 years old the night my parents told me to leave. It wasn't loud. There was no dramatic shouting. Just a quiet decision that changed everything. My sister stood behind them, arms crossed, tears on her face. She said I had stolen money from her room. I hadn't, but she was the favorite. She always had been. My father didn't ask questions. He didn't look confused. He looked disappointed. "That's enough," he said. "We won't raise a liar in this house." My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. She folded my clothes slowly, placing them into a black trash bag like she was packing away something that didn't belong anymore. I remember standing near the front door, holding that bag, waiting, hoping someone would say, "This is a mistake." No one did. It was raining outside. Not a storm, just steady, cold rain. The kind that soaks through your clothes quietly. My father opened the door and stepped aside. "You need to learn responsibility," he said. At 13 years old, I walked out of that house believing two things: that I must have done something terrible, and that no one was coming to fix it. The porch light turned off before I reached the end of the driveway. That was the moment I understood something most children never should. Home is not a place. It's a choice. And mine had just been taken away. What my parents didn't know that night was that 15 years later, they would be standing at my door, asking for mercy. If you ask me when the distance truly began, I won't say it was the night they told me to leave. It started long before that. My sister had always been the brighter light in the room, the one teachers praised, the one relatives hugged a little longer. If she made a mistake, it was pressure. If I made one, it was attitude. I learned early to stay quiet. The week before everything fell apart, money went missing from her bedroom. It wasn't a fortune, just a few $100s she had been saving. But in our house, it might as well have been thousands. She didn't accuse me right away. First, she mentioned it at dinner. Then she sighed loudly about it the next day. By the third evening, she was crying. "I saw her near my room," she said, pointing at me. That was all it took. I remember the look on my father's face. Not confusion. Not concern. Certainty. As if a puzzle piece had finally snapped into place. My mother asked me once, softly, "Did you take it?" I said no. Immediately. Clearly. But I could see it in her eyes. She was already preparing herself to believe otherwise. There was no conversation. No searching for proof. No checking bank withdrawals. No asking if maybe my sister had misplaced it. Just silence. Heavy and final. Later that night, I overheard them in the kitchen. "We can't let this behavior grow," my father said. "She's been difficult for years," my mother replied. Difficult. That word stayed with me. I wasn't loud. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't failing in school. But I wasn't her. And somehow, that had become enough. The next afternoon, my father came home early from work. That never happened. My sister was sitting at the table, red-eyed but calm now, almost relieved. "We've decided," he said. Decided. As if I had already confessed. As if I had already been found guilty. He told me trust, once broken, cannot live under the same roof. That actions have consequences. That maybe a little hardship would straighten me out. I kept waiting for someone to ask me again if I did it. No one did. And the strangest part? A small part of me began wondering if I deserved this. If maybe being less loved meant I had done something wrong without realizing it. That's what betrayal does when it comes from family. It doesn't just take your home. It takes your certainty. It rewrites your reflection. And at 13 years old, I stood there realizing something terrifying. The people who were supposed to protect me had already made up their minds. Without me, the first night away from home didn't feel real. I kept expecting my phone to ring. For my mother to say, "Come back." For my father to admit they had overreacted. It never rang. A friend from school, Emily, convinced her parents to let me stay on their couch for a few days. I told them it was just a misunderstanding at home. I didn't have the courage to explain the truth. A few days turned into 3 weeks. Every morning, I folded the blanket carefully, trying to make myself smaller, less noticeable, less permanent. I went to school pretending nothing had changed. I laughed when others laughed. I nodded when teachers spoke. But inside, I carried a quiet fear. What if Emily's parents decided I was too much trouble too? At 13, you're not old enough to rent an apartment. Not old enough to sign papers. But somehow, you're expected to survive. I found a small after-school job at a local diner washing dishes. The owner, Mr. Harris, didn't ask many questions. Maybe he saw something in my eyes. Maybe he just needed cheap help. The work was hard. My hands stayed red and cracked from soap and hot water. I smelled like grease even after showering. But it was money. And money meant options. I started saving every dollar in a small envelope hidden inside my backpack. I skipped lunches to make it last longer. Sometimes hunger felt easier than asking for help. Nights were the hardest. I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my mind. My sister's tears. My father's voice. My mother looking away. I wondered if they missed me. I wondered if my room had already been cleaned out. There were moments I almost called. Almost apologized for something I didn't do just to go back. But something inside me stopped that call every time. Pride? Maybe. Or maybe it was the quiet realization that if they could let me go so easily, I had to learn how to hold on to myself. By 16, I was juggling school and nearly full-time work. My grades didn't drop. If anything, they improved. Studying became my escape. Numbers made sense. Books didn't judge. Teachers began noticing. One counselor asked gently, "Are things okay at home?" I paused. Then I said, "I'm fine." Because explaining felt heavier than carrying it. When I turned 18, I graduated without either of my parents in the audience. I scanned the crowd anyway. Old habits die slowly. They weren't there. But I was. And that mattered. That day, holding my diploma, I made a quiet promise to myself. No matter how long it took. No matter how hard it became. I would build a life where no one could throw me out again. The struggle didn't break me. It reshaped me. Every shift at the diner. Every lonely birthday. Every tear no one saw. They weren't just painful memories. They were training. And without realizing it, the girl who had once stood in the rain with a trash bag was slowly becoming someone who would never beg to be chosen again. Leaving that town at 18 felt like stepping into thin air. There was no safety net. No family savings. No one waiting to catch me if I failed. But there was something new inside me. Resolve. I enrolled in a small state college 2 hours away. It wasn't prestigious, but it was affordable. Scholarships covered part of it. The rest, I handled the only way I knew how work. Morning classes. Afternoon library hours. Evening shifts at a grocery store. I learned how to stretch $20 across a week. How to fix a leaking sink from online tutorials. How to sit alone in a quiet apartment without feeling abandoned. At first, success didn't look glamorous. It looked like paying rent on time. It looked like buying groceries without counting coins. It looked like sleeping through the night without fear of being asked to leave. There were setbacks. During my second year, I failed an important exam. I sat in my car afterward, staring at the steering wheel, feeling that old familiar whisper. Maybe they were right about you. For a moment, 13-year-old me returned. But this time, I answered back. No one was there to defend me. So I defended myself. I retook the course. Studied twice as hard. Passed with honors. Something shifted after that. I stopped seeing myself as the girl who had been thrown out. I began seeing myself as the woman who had survived it. After graduation, I took a job at a small consulting firm. Entry level. Modest pay. Long hours. I listened more than I spoke. I noticed what others overlooked. Within 3 years, I had been promoted twice. Not because someone favored me, but because I showed up. Every single day. By 26, I had saved enough to take a risk. I started my own small consulting service from a rented office barely larger than a storage room. No grand opening. No investors applauding. Just me. A second-hand desk. And a laptop. The first few months were terrifying. Clients canceled. Contracts fell through. Some nights, I wondered if I had mistaken strength for stubbornness. But each time doubt crept in, I remembered the rain. I remembered standing alone at 13. Compared to that, failure wasn't frightening. It was temporary. Slowly, clients began returning. Word spread. Referrals grew. What started as 1 contract became 3, then 10. By 28, I had a small team. By 30, we were profitable enough that I could breathe without counting every dollar. The first time I held the keys to my own home, I stood in the doorway longer than necessary. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't flashy. But it was mine. No one could take it away with a single sentence. That night, sitting on the hardwood floor surrounded by unopened boxes, I realized something profound. I wasn't successful because they abandoned me. I was successful because I chose not to abandon myself. The anger I once carried had faded, not replaced with forgiveness, just clarity. Their decision had forced me into the world early. But the life I built? That was entirely my own. I no longer needed their approval. I no longer needed their apology. I had built something stronger than revenge. I had built independence. And just when life finally felt steady, just when peace had settled in quietly, there was a knock at my door. The knock was firm, but not aggressive. 3 steady taps. I wasn't expecting anyone. It was a quiet Thursday evening. I had just finished reviewing reports and was halfway through making tea. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But something made me walk to the door. When I opened it, time did something strange. It didn't stop. It folded. My father stood there, shoulders slightly bent, hair thinner and almost completely gray. My mother beside him looked smaller than I remembered. Fragile, as if life had quietly pressed down on her for years. They didn't look angry. They didn't look proud. They looked uncertain. For a few seconds, none of us spoke. My father cleared his throat first. "Hello," he said. Not, "We're sorry." Not, "Can we come in?" Just, "Hello." I held the door but didn't step aside. "Yes," I answered. My mother's eyes scanned my face the way they used to when I was sick as a child. But this time, there was no authority in her expression. Only hesitation. "We didn't know if you'd answer," she said softly. I almost smiled at that. 15 years ago, I hadn't been given the choice. Now they stood on my porch, waiting for mine. My father finally spoke again. "We've made mistakes." The word felt small. Carefully chosen. Mistakes. As if I had simply been misplaced. He explained their situation in short, practical sentences. Medical bills had drained their savings. My father had retired earlier than expected. The house I grew up in had been sold. My sister, he admitted quietly, had moved across the country and rarely called. There was no anger in his voice when he mentioned her, only disappointment. Life had not unfolded the way they expected. And now they had nowhere else to turn. "We were hoping." He began, then stopped. Hoping. It was almost painful to hear that word from him. My mother stepped forward slightly. "We just need some time. Until we get back on our feet." Back on their feet. I looked at them, really looked at them. These were not the towering figures of my childhood. Not the unquestionable authorities who decided my fate in a single afternoon. They were older now. Vulnerable. Human. For a brief moment, 13-year-old me flickered inside my chest. The girl holding a trash bag, waiting for mercy. But I wasn't her anymore. I had built walls, yes, but I had also built strength. "I'm sorry you're struggling," I said calmly. And I meant it. But sympathy and surrender are not the same thing. My father's eyes searched mine, perhaps looking for the softness I once carried so openly. Instead, he found something steady. Measured. Final. The silence between us grew heavy, not with anger, but with consequence. For the first time in our lives, the balance of power had shifted. And they knew it. For a long moment, none of us moved. The evening air was cool. I could hear distant traffic, a dog barking somewhere down the street. Ordinary sounds. An ordinary night. But nothing about this felt ordinary. I studied their faces again. Time had softened them. Life had humbled them. And yet, the memory of that rain-soaked driveway still lived inside me. Not loudly. Not painfully. Just clearly. I remembered waiting for someone to stop me. To say, "This isn't right." To choose me. No one had. Now they stood here, waiting for me to choose them. My mother's voice trembled slightly. We didn't know where else to go. That sentence held more truth than anything else they'd said. I believed her. But belief does not erase history. I was 13, I said quietly. It wasn't an accusation. It was a fact. My father lowered his eyes. We thought it would teach you something," he murmured. "It did," I replied. "It taught me how to survive without you." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list the years of struggle. I didn't describe the nights I cried or the jobs I worked. They could see the outcome standing in front of them. The house. The stability. The woman I had become. "I don't hate you," I continued. That seemed to surprise them. I've made peace with what happened. But peace doesn't mean pretending it didn't. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We were wrong," she whispered. Those words came 15 years late. And maybe that was the hardest part. Because a small part of me had waited for them once. Waited to hear that. But growth changes you. It rearranges your needs. I hope you find stability, I said gently. I truly do. Then I handed my father a card. It was for a local housing assistance program. I knew they had space. I had donated there before. His hand shook slightly as he took it. You won't let us stay? He asked. I held his gaze, steady but not cruel. I learned how to stand on my own, I said. You'll have to do the same. There was no triumph in my chest. No victory. Just closure. And as I slowly closed the door, I realized something powerful. Forgiveness is a gift, but access is a privilege. And some doors, once closed, remain that way for a reason. Life has a quiet way of returning our choices to us. When we are young, we depend on love to shape us. When we grow older, we learn that love must also carry responsibility. Forgiveness is important. It frees the heart from bitterness. But forgiveness does not always mean reopening doors that once caused harm. Sometimes the greatest act of strength is not revenge, it is boundaries. Family can fail us. People can change. Regret can come late. But resilience, once built, becomes something no one can take away. And in the end, how we rise matters more than how we were left behind.